Hello everyone. And so, today, I think we'll do something a bit more fun. And I'll show you a little fan theory of mine. The idea that Red Alert 3 is made up. Of course, you might hear that and think, Eddie, of course, Red Alert 3 is made up. It's a work of fiction. You're not telling me that there was really a time at some point where, you know, a bunch of European and American people and people from throughout the Commonwealth came together and fought Soviets and samurai robots and stuff like that. Of course it's made up. But what I mean by that is Red Alert 3 is made up in the universe of the Red Alert games. Now, you might hear that and think, oh, Ed's just not happy with how her favourite franchise in the Command & Conquer universe went. And, yeah, I am. You know, Generals 2 was never made. Rise of the Reds wasn't even, like, made into an official expansion. So, yeah. I'm not so happy with how Command & Conquer Generals ended. Why don't I present some evidence for why I think that the third Red Alert game is a work of fiction within Red Alert? Well, first, the artistic style. Very cartoony. Especially here. Some more cartoony imagery. More evocative of the various comic books. And for comparison, this is some box cover and art for Red Alert 2. You'll see it's a lot less cartoon-like. You might be thinking, yes, but Red Alert 2 came out in 2000, in 2001, 1999, that sort of time era. Red Alert 3 was 2008. Well, here's another game for around the same time. World in Conflict. This game is from 2007 in the original version, and in 2009 they released the expansion Soviet Assault. So as we can see, this is a much more toned down, much more realistic, one might say, art style. Which suggests to me a deliberate choice was made. Might as well get this manual, because we'll use that later. So, this art style that perhaps more evokes the comic book, is it perhaps an in-universe comic book? Well, another piece of evidence is just the sort of presentation. After all, in the first two Red Alert games, both sides were pretty even in a lot of ways. The Soviet conscript would say, if you told them to do something, would be like, "You're sure? Order received. For the Union!" Sort of, yeah, I'm going for it, but I'm not ultra enthusiastic about being here. You know, the flak trooper is sort of, oh, this gun's heavy. At least they have charm. That sort of kind of attitude, and a bit sort of... And the Allies, they're kind of already moving out. Hoorah! Although that's kind of inaccurate, actually, because having a GI say, hoorah! When that's actually a Marines thing, but, this is an alternate timeline, perhaps things are a bit different. Also, the Allies are very much peaceful kind of people, in a lot of ways. I mean, their frontline unit is the Peacekeeper, who's armed with a shotgun and a riot shield. Okay, yes, a riot shield for going into battle. Yes. Not the greatest idea. Or is it? And the javelin soldier, all nice and muscular, and hey, you build up your muscular tones in the military, because it's a very physical job in a lot of ways, but it seems a lot more like a bodybuilder. Almost like how comic book characters like Superman and others might look, as though he's part of the Justice League. And of course, our Soviet counterparts, well, the conscript is very enthusiastic, as it says here in the manual. Poorly trained, yet highly enthusiastic due to mental conditioning and healthy propaganda. Conscripts heedlessly charge into battle, firing assault rifles and hurling Molotov cocktails in blind allegiance to the state. I wonder how the conscript of Red Alert 2 is described. I mean, bear in mind, apart from voice lines in Red Alert 1, the Allies and Soviets share a rifle infantry unit. Who, with the only difference being that the manual says that the Soviets use an M16, sorry, the Allies use the M16 while the Soviets use the AK-47. So, let's contrast it with our allied. So let us at, so what is the Soviet conscript in Red Alert 2? Conscript. The counterpart to the Allied GI is the Soviet conscript. Not able to deploy into a fortified position, conscripts are cheaper to build than the Allied GI. Yes. Interesting, don't you think? Also, no reference in the Soviet conscript of Red Alert 2 to any kind of propaganda. And the flag trooper. The flak trooper, if you... sorry. My acting is one of those things. But, as I say, I'm just going to carry on a little bit. So, let's compare the flag trooper of Red Alert 2. So here's the flag trooper in Red Alert 2. Useful against both ground and air targets. This unit attacks with explosive flak, allowing him to damage aircraft and seriously wound infantry. What is the flag trooper of the Soviet Union of Red Alert 3? Gloriously free after years spent in Gulag. And yes, it doesn't say... And yes, that's what it says. I'm not just dropping the for the stereotypical accent. Gloriously free after years in Gulag, brutish flak troopers serve Mother Russia by hefting large anti-air flak cannons and attaching mines to enemy armor. Used on ground targets, their cannons are even more impressive. Yeah, nothing about the Gulag in Red Alert 2. Interesting. Nothing about that. Also, lines in game, you have a flag trooper saying, "Flag trooper, doing my time. What about that food you promised?" Stuff like that. Interesting. And, oh, here, for the Soviet barracks. Now, let's say in Red Alert 2. Now, the Allies and Soviets both have a building called the barracks, so they get... So I'll double check, see if they have the same building... Yep, so they use the same description. It's like the shared by all sides barracks. So the barracks for both the Allies and Soviets in Red Alert 2. The creation of all infantry units is performed here. Many of the more powerful and effective structures and base defences require the barracks. Now, what does the Soviet barracks say? Harsh training programs in the barracks turn scores of worthless serfs and criminals into feared, expendable soldiers. Which is kind of interesting, really. As you see, after all, Red Alert 2 didn't feel the need to bring up the Soviet system like that. Plus, serfdom had been abolished in 1871. Einstein, the earliest in history that Red Alert diverts from our timeline is in the 1920s when Albert Einstein goes back in time and kills Hitler. So, the fact that the Russian Empire had abolished serfdom in 1871, if I remember rightly, might have been a bit earlier. Oh yeah, 1867, sorry. Anyway, more to the point. So, there weren't any serfs in the Soviet Union. So, how is a Soviet barracks turning serfs into Soviet soldiers? Well, it's an interesting idea. And just before I do, before I answer that, I'm going to contrast this first with the Allied boot camp, which is the Allies' version of the barracks. Boot camp, a first-rate training centre for the Allies, infantry, animals, spies, and specialists. High quality, nothing about expendable infantry. Oh, and let's look at the fortress wall. First for the Allies. Defence at its most basic. Each purchase creates one section of wall. Place two sections within a few grids in a straight line and they will automatically connect. And the Soviets? Fortress wall. A marvel of state engineering. The wall is purchased one segment at a time, masterfully keeping decadent rabble out. Should that be the decadent rabble? Anyway, masterfully keeping decadent rabble out and the proletariat in. This feels very much like a 1950s propaganda piece. And you might be thinking, what about the Empire of the Rising Sun? Well, here's an interesting fact. Their frontline infantry, the Imperial Warrior, modern-day samurai, brandishing the sacred katana alongside a powerful energy rifle, light armour is worn with honour. But it is the fate and duty of every Imperial Warrior to die in perfect obedience to his Emperor. Kind of like World War II Pacific propaganda. Now, it's an interesting thing we note. Oh, and here's the Instant Dojo, the Empire's version of the barracks. Yoshiro's willing subjects undergo rigorous training at the instant dojo and emerge as fearless warriors. Einen Moment bitte. Oh. You want to join us, Gus? So, in Red Alert 2 Yuri's Revenge, we have the Initiate. Initiates use the power of their minds to do damage and can garrison civilian buildings. Yuri's forces and the Empire both use energy weapons for their frontline infantry. Now, the heavy Japanese-ish kind of focus on these forces plus forces, it could be an example of what we might call Orientalism on the part of the fictional writers of this propaganda piece for the Allies. You know, that when the Allied propagandists were coming up with this story, they decided to frame Yuri's forces in this Orientalist way, i.e. very different, highlighting just how different they are, hence all the politicization you often find. You know, especially as at the same time you'll often see that the enemy are somewhat both spectacular and other and terrifying. You know, the way that historical propagandists of the Allies in World War II portrayed the Japanese as, well, to quote one historian, superhuman, subhuman, anything but human. I think that's the way around. More to the point. And of course, Yuriko Omega. Feel free to let me know, if you happen to be Japanese, whether Yuriko is a Japanese name. But it's just interesting. Yuriko. Well, Yuriko and Yuri. Now, yes, Yuri's an old man, probably scientist, you know. Yuriko is a schoolgirl. Oh, by the looks of it, well, by appearance, has been experimented on. But, interestingly enough, Yuriko and Yuri could be one and the same in this propaganda piece. Yuri is a way of, you know, Yuriko is a way of essentially ridiculing Yuri. You know, as a schoolgirl, being personified as a schoolgirl, he is both infantilized and feminized. And, well, because we've lived in a patriarchal society for a good chunk of human history, you know, feminization is seen as inferior, weaker, less desirable. Masculine qualities prized over feminine qualities, and so quite a lot of history of the past 500 years, and probably before, but it's harder to, but there are a lot fewer written records back then, often show enemies as effeminate or feminized in some way. After all, British propagandists during the First World War used to portray Kaiser Wilhelm II wearing women's clothing. That was not entirely untrue. But that's a story that I don't think YouTube would like it if I told you. Yes. So I think that one would have to be saved for an OnlyFans episode. But, speaking of feminization and the feminine. That's another point we have. After all, women are in a way quite prominent in the iconography of Red Alert 3. But perhaps not in a very good way. Now, yes, and in case you're wondering, yeah, this is the poster that came with Red Alert 3. Yeah. Now I know what you're probably thinking. Oh, come on, Ed. You know, you were a teenager back then. You were assigned male at birth. You know what we were socialized. You know what guys were socialized to be into. They're just playing to that market. And admittedly, yes, I was probably a little bit younger than the average Command & Conquer player back then, but that's why I've also got this. This was released 2 years earlier. A catalogue of the first decade of Command & Conquer games, containing the original Tiberium Wars series just called Command & Conquer, the first 2 Red Alert games, Tiberium Sun and Firestorm, Command & Conquer Renegade, and of course, Command & Conquer Generals. Well, want to see the poster that came with this game? A tank. And on the other side, an ion cannon. And hey, it's not like there weren't women in those games too. Now, full disclosure, this is what the back of this poster looks like. It's not like they were putting weapons on the other side. So, why is this game... So you might be thinking, no, maybe there just weren't other women in there. I mean, you know, you could have found some. I mean, I know Black Lotus. I mean, for example, there's Black Lotus, of course, but, you know, she's not sexualized in the game, in Command & Conquer Generals very much, from what I could see. Yeah. Neither's the female Chinese newsreader. Nor either of the 2 male newsreaders for reference, but fair enough. That's just how it is at this point, it seems. So, and yes, there was a bit of, you know, sort of kind of sexiness, you might say, in Red Alert 2 and 1 as well, from what I gather. But it seemed a lot more toned down. You know, the Allied campaign in neither Red Alert 1 nor 2 has a cliffhanger where the commander has 2 women he can choose to date. 2 women both offering themselves as dates to him. Or her. Although, it was... I don't know, they probably seem to assume that there was I guess I got that vibe there was a sort of assumption of maleness on this commander. Maybe. But that leads to the question. Why is this game so saucy compared to other Red Alert titles, even? Well, I have my theory. And, you know, the accentuated female bodies, yeah, you may not like... Yes, we probably feel that this is kind of controversial these days, but, as I say, back in 2008, I guess there were some different attitudes, or just people weren't listening. But, point is, we got some of these kind of things. Now, that's where my theory comes in. Because you'll notice another game for around that time, say, World in Conflict, very similar genre, very similar kind of premise. Cold War goes hot. See, now there isn't a poster that comes with this copy at least, but, you know, the women in game, they're not particularly sexualised. You know, the wives, the husbands, and, you know, it's sort of husband-wife relationship, in a few cases, a mother-son relationship. I don't know enough French to know what the relationship between the French officer and the lady he was talking to on the phone was. Point is, in World in Conflict, the story's a lot less, like, flamboyant in that regard. A lot less saucy. Don't think we need to see the poster anymore. And point is, I actually think that this is an artistic point within the game. You know, because it's meant, well, don't know how to put this politely, but how about, say, it's just a sort of, let's say it's for the troops. Your allied soldier in the barracks or in his foxhole who's, you know, kind of the thing that'll, you know, something that he can enjoy. It's in universe, you see. It's a fiction. For the troops. So that they can just, you know, yeah, get a sort of yeehaw! Ooh yeah, allies for the win, kind of. Yeah, we're the good guys fighting against this slavish army of the Soviet Union and these weird fanatics from, well, who knows where. Yeah. And that is ultimately my theory on what Red Alert 3 is. In-game fiction. Well, I could be right, I could be wrong. Either way, it was lovely having you here.